Thank you, Delitzo. And before I kick off, I'd just like to welcome the delegation from the Ministry of Mines in Madagascar, headed by your good self, Tahiri, and recognise Kate Chamley, who is in her ambassadorial role for Madagascar from Australia. In the short time I've got, what I'd like to do is deliver a relatively simple, but I think very compelling story that is Akora Resources. I'll let you look at the first slide. There's the necessary disclaimer. So Akora, what's our modus operandi? It's unlocking Madagascar's high-grade iron ore potential. As you can see on the slide there, it's a two-part process. Initially, our flagship project, which you can see in the middle, lower middle part of the country of Madagascar, is the Bekisopa project. That's the focus of the discussion today. And most of the discussion will focus around what we're calling stage one, which is the startup DSO project for Bekisopa. Sitting behind that, and I'll touch on this briefly in the back end of the presentation, is the primary magnetite that's sitting underneath that. So the stage one development, as it shows on the slide there, we've just recently completed a BFS on the project, which contemplates 2 million tonnes per annum of high-grade direct ship iron ore, or colloquially called DSO, from the project with very strong economics. As you can see, the PFS, and I'll come to this in the next slide, delivers revenues of 1.25 billion Aussie and about $500 million in free cash pre-tax. If you only remember one slide in the presentation, I'd like you to focus on this one. For those of you who don't know Akora, we're ASX listed. We have a market capitalisation of about $14 million, or in US terms, about $9 million. So, as we all know, that's a micro cap. What you can see in front of you are the PFS numbers. So 2 million tonnes of production, initial conservative mine life of 6 years, recognising that only about 40% of the known strike length of mineralisation at the DSO level has been drilled. Very high investment, internal rate of return at 86%, an NPV of just under 150 million US in a company that's capped at 9 million. Low cash cost, $42 a tonne, and a quick payback. That's a very nice set of numbers, as a certain president said. The startup capital for this project is relatively modest, and what drew me to the business, I'm traditionally worked very much in base and precious metals. It's low risk, and why do I say low risk? If you look at the capital piece for mining and processing as a percentage of the total capital, it's low. It's a very simple operation, just under $6 million or thereabouts for both mining and processing. Most of the cost for this business is moving a tonne of material from mine to port for export. So it's really a logistics exercise. Similarly with the cost, if you look at the cost structure there at 40, this is in US dollars, $42 a tonne. We assumed a revenue line of $100 a tonne. You can see most of your cost is not in the mining, it's not in the processing, it's actually in your haulage. But the risk of execution for projects is often in your plant construction or your mining piece. We don't have those risks. So I look at it as a very low risk project and pathway to cash flow. So just for those that are not familiar with DSO, what does that look like? It's simple, shallow, open pit mining, dig and rip with probably D10 bulldozers, in-pit crushing, screen, haul, ship. So no drill blast in the early stages of this 6-year project. We think it's a very investable opportunity. What you can see there in that slide is both the cash flow and the cumulative cash flow. As you can see where that black line crosses the zero mark, the payback is 1.8 years. That's fast. And of course you go into positive cash flow straight after that. I mentioned earlier that the PFS contemplated a 6-year mine life, which we believe is conservative because we haven't drilled out the total strike length of the mineralisation. But a couple of takeaways for this. If we were to find an additional 1 million tonnes of material, every 1 million tonnes delivers about $21 million US to the NPV of the project. So clearly it's in our interest as time progresses to see whether or not we can augment what we currently know. I've mentioned logistics. For those of you not familiar with DSO, it's all about moving the material. What you can see there is the site in the centre of the screen. We have to spend some capital on upgrading the road infrastructure from site down to the main highway, which is termed RN7, and from that point the material is trucked to the port of Toliara. So that's the concept we're contemplating, and that's why that capital piece is what it is. Madagascar has been touched upon earlier, has a lot of resource potential, but it's also physically in a very good position from an iron ore perspective. You can see the country of Madagascar off the east coast of Africa. Those green dots on the screen are potential destinations for this material. I would stress that we haven't locked up that destination at this point in time. That's not appropriate, but clearly we'll be working on that as time progresses. Perhaps this is the second most important slide, is what's next for us, what are the next key steps. We're working in concert with the Government of Madagascar to complete the MOU, so it's part of our permitting process, so that's a key plank to allow us to advance. In parallel with that, we've had quite a lot of inbound interest from parties potentially to participate in this project with us. So we're running a strategic partnering process as well, because as you would recognise, if we're capped at $14 million Aussie and we've got a capital piece which is 61 US, call it 100 million, that's a bit of a big bite for a small company. So we will work on that in parallel, and that's part of the project financing. We will then advance the feasibility work. And I think the other thing that's very important is to just, because we're a very small organisation, is we will add human capability as we move forward with those that are very experienced in this space. So there's plenty for us to do from now through to Christmas time of this year. I just wanted to take a moment. The majority of this discussion is about the DSO and the value argument for the company, which hopefully I've left you that message. But what's intriguing about the mineralisation at Becky Soper is what I've been talking about is that little purple slither you can see on those two images in front of you. So that's the DSO material. What's sitting underneath that is an exploration target of somewhere between 500 and 1 billion tonnes of very good quality magnetite, circa 68%. That's for the future, but I suppose the message is that this is more than just the starter project. There's something to follow on. For those of you not familiar with magnetite, it's just the perfect feedstock material for low impurity DRI grade stuff to go into furnaces. For the bigger players, clearly that's the future of this project, and it's the future for us. But we do have to walk before we can run, and obviously we're very focused on the next six years for the DSO material. But very exciting future following on from that initial stage. I just thought I'd take a few moments before I finish to talk you through our investment case, but also to remind you about the life cycle of small resource companies and their discovery and maturity process. So there's a chart that you can see there talking about the life cycle. So this is talking about single asset companies, which pretty much we are. You go through an initial stage where you identify a project, you start drilling or exploring a project, and if you're fortunate enough to be successful, you make a discovery. That's the first rise in that chart that you can see. That's the first rise in your share price performance. Then when that happens, there's this period called an orphan period, which I believe that's where Akora is right now. We're in the orphan period where everyone goes, oh, well, you've found this great deposit, but what are you going to do next? How are you going to fund it? are you permitted, all those sorts of things. So I think we're sitting right in that orphan period just prior to the point of launch. You can plot this chart on many companies. It's not unique to Akora. I've seen it many times. The other takeaway is that usually takes about 10 years. And we're at that 10-year mark. So as a company, I'm new to the company, but we're at that 10-year mark. So I suppose the takeaway is clearly the DSO is very exciting. It offers a revenue to cost ratio, which is a great measure of in excess of 2 to 1. We've got that minimum 6-year life, and we've only explored about 40% of the resource. We are currently trading at 5% of the NPV of the DSO, not considering the primary magnetite. Clearly, we've got a very bright future. We're excited to take this project forward. I think it's a nation-building project for Madagascar. We're working collaboratively with the ministry on this, and we're very keen to take it forward. With that, I'll cease and hand it back to our chair.